Imagine standing under an endless sky, barefoot on the African savanna with nothing but the stars to light your night. No phones, no homes, no language, only silence, instinct, and the overwhelming force of survival. This is where we began. 2.8 million years ago, before we were even fully human, we were wanderers in a wild world. And yet even then, the seed of greatness was planted. Around 2.8 million years ago, a spark ignited that would forever alter the course of Earth's history. It wasn't a fire in the literal sense, not yet, but a biological and evolutionary spark. The first signs of what would eventually become humankind. In the eastern part of Africa, particularly the Afar region of Ethiopia, something extraordinary began to unfold. Fossil evidence from this period, most notably a jawbone fragment attributed to one of the earliest members of the genus Homo, marks the beginning of our incredible journey. This moment in prehistory was not just another chapter in the evolutionary book of life. It was the turning point, the prologue to what would one day become civilization. Our ancestors, transitioning from earlier forms like Australopithecus, began to display traits that were increasingly human-like. They began to walk upright with more efficiency, their brains slowly grew in size, and their hands grew more dexterous. These changes were not subtle and progressive, shaped by millions of years of natural selection and environmental pressures. At this time, Earth was a very different place. Massive climatic shifts were transforming the African landscape, turning dense forests into open savannas. The disappearance of trees forced our ancestors to adapt or perish. Upright walking became more than an advantage, it was a necessity. It freed their hands to carry tools, food, or infants. It elevated their eyes to see predators from afar. It represented a small evolutionary step that laid the foundation for something far greater. But physical changes weren't the only story. Alongside bipedalism, there were cognitive shifts happening in their brains. Early flickers of abstract thought, problem-solving, and social interaction. These were the seeds of language, culture, and consciousness. This period marked the true beginning of what we now call the human condition, the formation of self-awareness and creativity buried deep in the genetic memory of our species. The journey was anything but easy. Life for early hominins was harsh and unforgiving. They had no permanent shelter, no weapons beyond sharpened rocks or sticks, and no way to communicate beyond simple gestures or primitive vocalizations. Predators lurked in the shadows, saber-toothed cats, giant hyenas, and crocodiles. Hunger was constant, illness was fatal. And yet against these odds, the earliest members of Homo endured. They began to scavenge, hunt, and forage more effectively. They began to experiment with tools, using chipped stones to cut meat or break bones for marrow. These small victories were revolutionary. For the first time, a creature on Earth wasn't just reacting to nature, it was starting to manipulate it. That moment 2.8 million years ago didn't just represent the birth of a species. It represented the birth of ambition, of innovation, of resilience. The first spark of humanity wasn't in our tools or our fire. It was in our will to change, to adapt, and to dream. From the dust of ancient savannas rose a lineage that would one day build cities, send rockets into space, write poetry, and search for meaning in the stars. It all started there with a spark. Our ancestors didn't have technology, yet they crafted stone tools from nothing. They didn't have fire until they learned how to tame it. They had no words, but they had vision. Through unimaginable struggles, they adapted, evolved, and endured. Every predator they escaped, every winter they survived, every step they took toward intelligence was a step taken for you. The world 2.8 million years ago was vast, wild, and unpredictable. Life was ruled by instinct, survival, and the struggle against nature's harshest elements. But deep within the chaos, evolution was sculpting something extraordinary. The Earth's climate was shifting dramatically. Ice ages began to influence global temperatures, and the African continent was undergoing rapid transformation. Rainforests were giving way to open grasslands and dry savannas, a change that placed immense pressure on every living species. The environment was no longer stable, and only the most adaptable would survive. In these new terrains, early hominins were forced to evolve or vanish. This wasn't simply a story of biology, but of survival, strategy, and change. Animals with specialized diets or rigid behaviors often disappeared, while our ancestors started to explore new ways of living. These vast plains encouraged mobility, cooperation, and adaptability, setting the scene for social structures and deeper intelligence to emerge. Amidst this landscape, the earliest Homo species began forging their identity. The unpredictable environment acted as a training ground for resilience and innovation. Scarcity of food meant that our ancestors had to diversify their diets, scavenging meat from carcasses, cracking bones for marrow, and learning how to use stone tools more efficiently. It was a time when intelligence became a survival tool. The challenges posed by the environment, droughts, predators, competition, were immense, but so was the will to endure. Unlike other animals that depended solely on physical prowess or speed, our ancestors began to rely on their growing mental abilities. Observation, planning, and problem-solving were gradually becoming part of their survival toolkit. These developments marked a profound shift from instinct-driven behavior to something much more purposeful and calculated. The shifting environment didn't just shape the body, it shaped the mind. As life demanded more from our ancestors, their brains responded by evolving to process more complex thoughts, navigating through dangerous territory, remembering where water and food could be found, and coordinating within a social group all demanded higher cognitive function. This new mental wiring set the stage for empathy, communication, and long-term thinking. Even the act of walking upright had cognitive consequences. It allowed for better field vision and encouraged brain expansion due to biomechanical changes in childbirth. This was a chain reaction that began in the soil and skies and echoed inside skulls. It was a transformative age where Earth itself became both a crucible and a canvas, forcing the raw clay of early hominins to become something more. In many ways, the evolutionary pressure cooker of 2.8 million years ago was the birthplace of every modern human trait. The relentless environmental shifts, combined with natural selection, encouraged the first true acts of human creativity and foresight. Life was unforgiving, but the species that would eventually become Homo sapiens refused to give in. They adapted, they endured, and they grew not just in body but in spirit. This era reminds us that it was hardship, not comfort, that gave rise to the most defining aspects of what it means to be human. Every skyscraper, every symphony, every technological leap traces its roots back to that unforgiving, ever-changing world. It was there, among the dry winds and prowling beasts, that our story truly began. You are not just living today because of chance. You are the result of a 2.8 million year journey of grit, innovation, and strength. Their victories live in your DNA. Their determination pulses through your veins. When they stumbled, they got up. When they failed, they tried again. And slowly, generation after generation, they transformed fear into curiosity, struggle into progress, and survival into legacy. ChatGPT said, roughly 2.8 million years ago, the early ancestors of humans began to transition from tree-dwelling primates to upright walking, tool-using beings, marking one of the most pivotal moments in evolutionary history. This shift wasn't just physical, it was also cultural and behavioral. The development of tools represented far more than the manipulation of stone. It was a declaration of intent, a leap into an entirely new realm of interaction with the environment. Stones were no longer just parts of the landscape. They became extensions of the body, weapons for defense, instruments for butchering meat, and keys to unlocking nourishment that was once inaccessible. This innovation didn't happen in isolation. It was the result of observation, trial and error, and a growing awareness of cause and effect. With the creation and use of tools, our ancestors demonstrated foresight, an understanding of materials, and the beginnings of creative thought. The emergence of tools also meant that food sources could be expanded. No longer limited to fruits, leaves, and occasional small prey, early hominins began to exploit marrow-rich bones, hunt small animals, and scrape meat from tough hides. This increase in protein consumption is believed to have played a major role in brain expansion. More calories meant more energy to support a growing brain, and more brain power meant greater capacity to invent, adapt, and strategize. It's a feedback loop that forever altered the human trajectory. But these tools also tell us something deeper. The creators of these objects were learning to shape the world around them. Instead of reacting to nature, they were beginning to influence it in ways that no other species could. This was the spark of transformation, from survival to mastery. Social behavior also evolved alongside tool usage. The ability to pass down knowledge through imitation, observation, or perhaps early forms of communication helped preserve innovation and spread it across generations. The earliest stone tools, known as Oldowan tools, have been found in various parts of Africa, suggesting that this knowledge was not confined to a single group. Sharing information became as important as discovering it. Community bonds likely grew stronger, as working together meant greater success in hunting, scavenging, and defending against predators. These interactions would lay the foundation for language, culture, and eventually civilization. The early hominins didn't just create tools. They created the beginnings of shared knowledge and with it, a shared identity. In the vast expanse of history, the invention of stone tools may seem small, but in truth it was revolutionary. It marked the dawn of human agency, the moment when we began to write our own story, rather than be written by nature. That first flake chipped off a stone echoed louder than thunder through time. It signified a future where thought could shape matter, and where intention could be made real. It was here, in this subtle yet profound act, that humanity found its first true voice. So if you ever doubt your ability, remember this: your story didn't start yesterday. It began in the dust of time, carved by those who had nothing but refused to give up. The fire in you isn't new, it's ancient. It's the same flame that lit up the first torch in a cold cave. The same flame that looked up at the stars and dreamed of something more. As the climate fluctuated and the African landscape transformed millions of years ago, early hominins faced unprecedented challenges that would test their adaptability to the core. Dense forests gradually gave way to open savannas, and those who once thrived in the trees now found themselves exposed under the sun, vulnerable on the plains. But rather than perish, they adapted. This was a period of immense environmental pressure, and only those species capable of evolving in real time, adjusting their habits, diets, mobility, and behavior, could survive. What followed was not merely biological adaptation, but an awakening of innovation. Instead of depending solely on instinct, these early beings began to rely on experience and choice. They started to observe patterns in nature, understand the migration of animals, anticipate the seasons, and gradually adjust their lifestyles to align with this new rhythm of the earth. One of the most critical adaptations was the development of bipedalism. Walking upright allowed hominins to see further across the savanna, spot predators, and free their hands for carrying tools, food, or offspring. This change wasn't instantaneous. It took millions of years, but its impact was irreversible. It led to structural changes in the spine, hips, and skull. Bipedalism also demanded more cooperation and awareness within groups. As these early humans ventured farther for food or shelter, they needed each other more than ever. Safety was in numbers, and those who worked together increased their chances of survival. This marked a subtle yet profound shift in the importance of social structures. The family unit began to solidify, and the concept of protection, loyalty, and shared responsibility began to shape hominin society. Dietary flexibility also played a vital role. Early humans learned to consume a wider variety of foods, from roots and tubers to insects and meat. This adaptability provided resilience in the face of changing ecosystems. When forests disappeared or rivers dried up, they didn't perish. They moved, they explored, they experimented. Their curiosity became their compass. In this way, environmental pressures didn't crush them. They sculpted them into something stronger, more aware, more prepared for the unknown. Every step they took on those harsh plains was a testament to their resilience. It was the birth of problem-solving and long-term planning. For the first time, a species was not only reacting to the world, it was preparing for its future. This chapter of human evolution shows that crisis often becomes the birthplace of growth. Where lesser species might have gone extinct, our ancestors rose. Through ingenuity, adaptation, and the will to survive, they unlocked the traits that would later define us: endurance, intelligence, cooperation, and above all, a refusal to be defeated by circumstance. These early hominins didn't just survive the harshest conditions, they laid the foundation for everything that would come after. Their legacy is not just written in fossils or tools, but in the very resilience that pulses through us today. In the vast expanse of history, the invention of stone tools may seem small, but in truth, it was revolutionary. It marked the dawn of human agency, the moment when we began to write our own story, rather than be written by nature. That first flake chipped off a stone echoed louder than thunder through time. It signified a future where thought could shape matter and where intention could be made real. It was here, in this subtle yet profound act, that humanity found its first true voice. As early hominins began to form tighter social groups, a silent revolution was underway, one that would lay the groundwork for the complex societies we live in today. At first glance, their interactions may seem simple: sharing food, cooperating in hunts, or alerting each other to danger. But beneath these behaviors was something deeper: a burgeoning emotional intelligence, a sense of empathy, and a capacity for connection. These were not mere survival strategies. They were the seeds of humanity. In small groups huddled around campfires or tucked inside natural shelters, our ancestors began to rely on one another, not just for physical protection, but for emotional support. Mothers cared not just for their own children, but helped others. Elders, too weak to hunt, were still valued for their knowledge. These acts of compassion were not just evolutionary flukes, they became survival advantages in their own right. Over time, this emotional closeness gave rise to early forms of communication. Even before language as we know it, these early humans used gestures, facial expressions, body movement, and vocalizations to share meaning. A warning cry could save a tribe. A reassuring touch could calm a frightened child. These nonverbal cues formed the basis of trust and collaboration, which allowed hominins to coordinate more effectively than any other species on Earth. This trust wasn't just essential in daily life. It became the cornerstone of community. It fostered shared identity, mutual goals, and a sense of belonging. The group began to matter more than the individual, and from this shift emerged a powerful force: culture. Culture, in its earliest form, wasn't art or music. It was shared behavior, passed down from one generation to the next. It was the knowledge of which plants to eat, how to build a shelter, when to migrate, and how to survive a drought. These weren't instinctual behaviors, but learned ones, handed down through demonstration and repetition. Culture became the memory of the group. With every new tool invented, every new lesson taught, humans became less dependent on evolution to adapt and more dependent on each other. This interdependence transformed survival into something greater. It birthed meaning. Rituals may have started as simple routines, but over time they carried symbolic weight. Perhaps a stone was always placed near a burial spot, or a particular chant echoed before a hunt. These actions, rooted in shared emotion, hinted at the early stages of belief system, an understanding that life was more than just survival. We may never know exactly when humans first began to ask why, but we do know this. The emotional bonds that connected early humans helped shape the spiritual, cultural, and moral frameworks that would define civilizations. In the struggle to survive, our ancestors discovered something far greater than individual strength. They discovered the transformative power of connection. It wasn't the sharpest claws or the fastest legs that ensured our rise. It was the heart, the mind, and the courage to care for one another. This spirit still echoes in us today, reminding us that no matter how far we advance, our strength will always lie in our ability to stand together. The mastery of fire stands as one of the greatest milestones in the journey of early human development, a transformation so powerful that it reshaped not only our physical world, but the very structure of our lives. Before fire, our ancestors were at the mercy of nature's elements. Cold, darkness, predators, and raw food all dictated the boundaries of their existence. But when they learned to control fire, they unlocked a new dimension of possibility. The night, once feared and avoided, became a time for gathering, for storytelling, for connection. The flame brought warmth, light, and security, but it also brought time to think, to reflect, to share. With fire, early humans created a space where community could thrive, where ideas could be exchanged, and where memory could be preserved. It allowed them to expand their days, to survive colder climates, and to push farther into the world. Cooking was another revolution born of fire. No longer forced to chew raw, tough meat and digest hard-to-process plant matter, our ancestors began to soften their food. This seemingly simple act had dramatic effects on human evolution. Cooked food required less effort to chew and digest, which over millennia influenced the shrinking of the jaw and gut, while supporting the expansion of the brain. Fire, in essence, fueled the mind. With more efficient digestion and increased caloric intake, the brain grew more complex, enabling new forms of thinking, planning, and dreaming. This development, subtle at first, set in motion the intellectual ascent of humanity. Conversations around the fire weren't just idle chatter. They were the precursors to oral traditions, mythologies, and the earliest philosophies of existence. Beyond the physical advantages, fire was symbolic. It represented control over nature, the first real assertion that humans could not just adapt to the environment, but change it. Fire allowed hominins to forge tools more precisely, to shape weapons and utensils, to alter landscapes, and eventually to build permanent settlements. The flickering light became sacred to many early cultures, often associated with life itself, with renewal, purification, and even divine presence. In many ways, fire became humanity's first companion, a force both feared and revered, a source of death if uncontrolled and life if nurtured. But perhaps the most important gift of fire was its role in bringing people together. Around a campfire, the first communities found their voice. They shared experiences, taught lessons, grieved losses, and celebrated victories. The fire turned survival into something communal. It connected individuals across generations and gave birth to continuity, a sense that what was learned today could be passed on tomorrow. It was here, in these circles of warmth and flickering light, that culture deepened and human identity began to take its fuller shape. Even now, in our modern world of artificial light and digital connection, fire remains a symbol of unity and inspiration. It reminds us of our shared beginnings, our early struggles, and our triumphs over fear and limitation. It tells the story of how we became more than just animals reacting to nature. We became creators, thinkers, and dreamers. And that journey, sparked by fire, continues to burn in every human spirit that dares to imagine something greater.